an off-season it's been for the Colorado and Colorado fans. We've got a lot of them that live here in the Phoenix area since hiring Deion Sanders this winter, but they are off to the Big 12. And joining us now, we're going up to Denver, which, Brandon, just enlighten us on the weather today there, because it's about 1:15 here, and we love something positive to get us to the rest of this day.
Well, we got a high of 90. We got a high 93, and then our typical afternoon thunderstorms we have to be on the lookout for. It's rained like it's Seattle from mid-May to mid-June.
Wow.
You got me, guys?
Yes. Yeah. Wow.
So, yeah. Okay, sorry. But 93 to 90 is 97 a couple times this week. That's about as hot as it'll be all year. And as we get into August and into training camp, which gets going tomorrow for the Broncos, it'll be like in the 80s a bunch of days with very little humidity most days. So, my wife's got to come back down there for work because, she's down there a lot. And she's trying to push it off to September or October if she can.
Don't blame her. Yeah, November would probably be smart.
Yeah, good move.
Brandon Krisztal joining us, sports anchor, reporter, KOA in Colorado. You can follow him on Twitter at BK Denver Sports. He's also a correspondent for Fox Sports Radio. I want to ask, what is the overall response from the Buffalo fans going back to the Big 12? I'm sure it's probably pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it's mostly just the reality that the Pac-12 feels like it's dying, right? And so I have a number of friends, whether they played at CU that I work with or interact with it, or just went to CU, loved the university. And it made sense when they joined the Pac-12. And you look at the type of school they're trying to be. Now they were pretending to be Stanford, and it really is why Mel Tucker left, and they changed all their transfer rules to be normal. And that's why Deion's gotten some of the transfers he's gotten in. But in general, it made sense to be out there. With USC and UCLA leaving and the conference certainly seemingly on life support, you start looking around and saying, okay, what makes sense? And Deion being here and having plenty of relationships with high school coaches all across the state of Texas, I think would push for this anyway, or certainly potentially. But with the door open with UCLA and USC headed to the Big Ten, it just makes a lot of sense. And then the hope for me as a fan of the Big 12, like the Big 12 started my freshman year of college. I grew up in Dallas. My whole family went to Texas. I chose to go to KU, not K-State, obviously, because of the journalism school. But I knew I'd be back, covering the teams in Texas because I knew what I wanted to do when I said I wasn't going to play pro ball or somebody decided for me at 5'8". I was not Wes Welker. Anyway, but the point being, it was such an exciting conference. And with the Big 8 joining those four schools, like, oh, this is a great conference. Well, obviously Nebraska leaving, CU leaving, weakened it some, and then certainly with Texas and OU leaving. But I think bringing Colorado back, a lot of people still appreciate that tradition. 1948 is when they joined the Big 8. And if you could add Utah and the two Arizona schools, which would kind of be my preference, I'd love to kick out Cincinnati and UCF and put Oregon and Washington, and that doesn't seem likely. But I think and I'd love to know y'all's perspective on whether the two Arizona schools are coming as well. But it feels like, look, it's not the SEC, and we get that. But it's going to be a 12-team playoff. There's going to be teams from out here with NIL and with the way the landscape is. There's going to be teams west of the Central Time Zone that are going to be in the playoff mix plenty. And so I think it's exciting, and it's probably best case scenario right now for where CU is.
Brandon, you talk about Coach Prime, and I'm sitting there thinking while they're recruiting him to go after him and hire him, that he might have had a few wish lists, i.e. that he would highly encourage Colorado to make the move to the Big 12, that he might have had a little bit of a push in that before they hired him. Is there any speculation or rumor or validation that might have been one of his requests to move on back to the Big 12?
Yeah, and I don't know if it's been spelled out like that, but I think just reading between the lines and talking to people close to the program that I really trust, they said that this is something that just makes – and look, when he took the job, USC and UCLA were already headed to the Big Ten, so he knew the landscape from the get-go. And so I think that understanding, look, could they run through the Big or the Pac-12 in theory once UCLA and USC are gone, maybe certainly more easily than what the Trojans are lots of years and what they've been, the better part of the last 2-3 decades, especially since Pete Carroll was there. And UCLA is kind of a sleeping giant. We know that if they get the right guys at the right time, they could make some noise. But I think that this had to be certainly high on his list of likely outcomes. The real question, and I think this is going to be really fascinating, is how long does he end up staying here? Because I don't know how many games they're going to win this year. It's a really tough schedule with a bunch of NFL quarterbacks that they'll be playing against and some really good players. and getting a bunch of, he's got some top end guys. His kid's a legit pro prospect. I'm talking to some people that I trust and have seen him up close. They say he's got the right demeanor, he's got the right arm. If he could run like his dad, he'd be Lamar Jackson, but he's not. And then Travis Hunter, legit best player in the country, type talent. And the kid they got from Miami, Cormani McClain. But they are still full of, even though they brought in new players, second and third team guys from other programs that maybe were going to be starters at some point. But it wasn't like they were picking off starters from LSU and Alabama's roster and bringing them to Boulder. So it'll just be fascinating to see once Shedur's gone, how long Deion stays, if he can sustain winning, or does God call him to another school in the Southeast?
My question is now that this is taking place and it's going to be official, has the city, the area, the entire state just losing their minds?
I don't know. I think it's kind of person to person, Jimmy, because some people like the Pac-12 travel and all of that. And it's been fun over the last decade and change.
Yeah.
But there is still some historic games. I don't know if you call them rivalries. Certainly Kansas fans love coming to Boulder, especially for basketball. If they're on the western side of the state, it's easier to get a ticket in Boulder than it is to get a ticket in Allen Fieldhouse. K-State and Colorado have had plenty of battles, especially when you think about some of those really good Big 12 North teams, in the early and mid-'90s. And I guess as they got into the 2000s, right, Michael Bishop and going head-to-head with CU and their stock of pros in the Gary Barnett era. And so I think that there's some nostalgia plus the practicality, right? The Pac-12 feels like it's about to not exist. So you might as well be out in front of it. And while they're losing $5 million from what the old Pac-12 TV deal was, which is, I want to say, around $37 million, the new one they're talking about at most would be 20. So losing $5 million, but still up 12 versus losing 17 million in the short term makes sense on that front as well.
And I would say this, Brandon, when you look at the overall package, that they're guaranteed to get the money next year when they join the conference. That had to be one of those closing deals from that standpoint too. But overall, when you look at the Pac-12 versus the Big 12, the cachet that the Big 12 has to bring the prodigal son back home to the old Big 8 had to speak volumes and a sigh of relief for the folks there in Colorado.
I think so, because I don't think they wanted to join the Mountain West, even though you could argue that the way they perform, certainly on the football field. Tad Boyle's had a pretty good basketball team that's made the tournament for the last 6 years, I think, something like that, 5 of the last 8, something. But on the football field, it's been atrocious. And so I think that to know that you're not joining CSU and Air Force and Wyoming, who, again, you probably fit in with right about now, but can go where there is some traditional we'll put powerhouses in quotes, and certainly competitive teams that puts
3 minutes
guys in the pros across the whole league, and so you got to look at K-State, Oklahoma State, Baylor, Houston. Certainly back in the day had plenty of pros and had such a big recruiting base there just because of the city of Houston. And Cincinnati's been really good of late. We'll see what UCF means to the conference. West Virginia's been competitive at times and certainly has had a lot of pros over the years. So it's going to be really interesting, but I just don't think that CU is the last team coming, right? You got to think that whether it's Arizona schools, Utah, all three, some combination of them, but it'll be a stronger 16-team league than it is right now as it sits as a 14-team league for this final season. And the timing of it's perfect, right? With all the disastrous PR that the Pac-12 commissioner is bringing on himself, talking about a deal or no deal and things being premature, that with OU and Texas leaving next year, to get CU in, they don't have to pay the Pac-12 any exit fee. And if I was CU, I'd be like, let's make sure there's a Pac-12 in 6 months to pay an exit fee too. But just the timing of, their agreement, this allows the Big 12 to not only save face, but say, hey, we're building back up. We've added BYU, I think, is actually a pretty big add. And I think if you add Utah with BYU,
2 minutes,
that rivalry, and you got that part of the, the mountain time zone and everything. And so then I think the two Arizona schools would be the icing on the cake.
Any of your sources tell you that Oregon and Washington are sniffing the Big 12, or are they looking more for Big 10?
Yeah, I think they're looking Big 10, but I think Big 12 is certainly looking at them because I think you have to kind of make sure you've turned over every stone, right? You can't just assume that, this is going to happen or that's going to happen. We had Pat Forty on KOA this morning on our morning show, and he's certainly more plugged into it than I am. And he said talking to commissioners at people involved higher ups in the SEC and the Big 12, that everyone, or SEC and Big 10, that everyone is confident 16-team leagues work very well in terms of just logistics, even with the travel challenges that certainly the two California schools will have for their non-football, non-men's basketball travel back east of the Big Ten. But once you get north of 18, it just gets trickier. So if you get to 18, you get to 20, it's likely inevitable, especially if the ACC and Pac-12 can't sustain, that they just break off and join those other leagues. And maybe you then create a pod system geographically where you're playing all those teams near you twice and the other teams, mixing and matching here and there. But it certainly, if I'm the Big 12, I'm making sure, and I think let's just say all 5 of those teams wanted to come: Arizona State, Utah, Oregon, and Washington. I think you add them both, and maybe even add Oregon State and Washington State, and just absorb. Say, we're going to be this mega league, and we'll make the logistics work. Yeah, SEC, we get it. You tell us it means more, and that's fine. And lots of championships have come from there, certainly in football. But this is a new world we live in, and it'll be interesting to see, especially with 12 teams going to the playoff, how much that opens it up to, like I said, teams west of the Central Time Zone.
Hey, since you're a Texas guy, I don't know the numbers, but how much has Deion Sanders been able to put a footprint in Texas because of his Cowboy days?
Well, and not just Cowboys days, but he stayed in Dallas, right?
Yeah, we can break when you're good.
LA to do NFL Network. All 3 of his boys played football in and around Dallas, as he lived in a couple different houses in the North Dallas area, and they all started playing when they were little, right? So Deion not only has the network of football people he knows from his playing days and guys that he played with that are spread out all over the city and their friends, family, kids, all of that, but then his own kids and all the kids he coached who have now gone on to become, in some respects, coaches all around. So he's got a network across Texas that I think helped him bolster his roster at Jackson State. I haven't broken down the CU roster because it feels like it changes every day.
Yeah.
But knowing that the Buffs will be playing in Texas a handful of times every year is going to be a much easier sell to get the kids that love Deion, want to be around him and his other NFL coaches, and guys that can help them get there, and understand that the family's going to get to see him play in Waco and Fort Worth and Stillwater, Oklahoma, which is an easy drive. And if they're Dallas folks, to get to K-State and KU's not the longest drive, certainly Houston as well now. So I think that this will only help his recruiting, and maybe it makes him stay a little longer. But again, it depends on when God calls him to go somewhere else.
Yeah, good point. Brandon, great stuff as always, man. Thanks for the time. We appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, guys. I'm not going to be there for the Broncos-Cardinals, but that doesn't mean we can't chat that week for the preseason game number 1.
Okay. Absolutely, we'll do it. That's great stuff as always. Brandon Krisztal, sports anchor KOA in Colorado. Follow him on Twitter at BK Denver Sports. Anything Denver Sports, you can follow him on Twitter there. He's also one of our affiliates for Fox Sports Radio as well. Well, what's next?